I worry about things that we don't talk about. And in this economy, in the U.S. economy, and in most of the G7 economies, the conversation about deficits and growth are just not part of the dialogue. And I really do believe if we don't start focusing on how do we grow, we're in real trouble. The G7 has a debt to GDP of 124. That means they have more debt than their GDP. And historically, it used to be considered something safe around 50% of GDP. Another little factoid about America. In 2000, our US deficit was $8 trillion. So 223 years of building a deficit of $8 trillion. From 2000 then to 2023, we added $23 trillion of deficits. We are now breaking through 100% of debt to GDP as a nation. We have both parties talking about cutting taxes or doing this, and the reality is we're not going to be able to do that. At the same time, we are seeing a growth in the global capital markets. We're seeing the capital markets in India growing, in Saudi Arabia growing, Japan. The biggest benefit of the United States is the strength of the U.S. capital markets. So even post-financial crisis, we were the fastest economy growing out of the Great Recession. But as we elevated the capital standards in the banking system, we've been able to offset the extraction of debt capacity through the capital markets. And the strength of the United States that no other country has is the strength of our banking system and the strength of the capital markets. And that's a blessing, and neither party in the United States nor most parties in Europe are talking about how are we going to grow out of this problem. The CBO has just estimated that our deficits, I think over the next 10 years, are going to go to $50 trillion. This is not funny money. This is a serious, serious problem. And if the capital markets overseas become more developed, that's going to become a better destination for capital. Right now, the U.S. is the greatest location for capital, and that's why we're able to finance our deficits. Other G7 countries like Italy and Japan have deficits far worse than the United States. In fact, they're over 200 debt to GDP. Yet, their savings rates are so large, mainly because their capital markets are so weak. So much money is just sitting in a bank account. And their general fear, and I talk about hope and fear a lot, but the fear of their economy, their fear of their future, both in Japan and Italy, people save more and more and more. And so that savings, though, is able to finance the Japanese and Italian deficits. So they have a much worse problem than we do, but they're not dependent on foreign capital. The United States is dependent on 40% of international capital to finance their deficits. And we are treating it like we're going to have this luxury forever. I hope we do. I think it's kind of wrong to think that. I believe in America more than any other country. As I travel around the world, I see more opportunity to put more capital in the United States over the next 5 years than any place in the world. So I'm not fearful this is going to be a problem in the next 5 years, but it could be a real problem for somebody who has 7 grandchildren. And I really am very worried about what does that mean? So we have to have a growth agenda. And the only way I know we're going to have a growth agenda is to rebuild our economies and infrastructure, in digitization, decarbonization, of rebuilding our infrastructure so we can increase productivity. I mean, the key for any economy, elevate productivity. And I do believe if you overlay the potential of AI and how that's going to change robotics, I've actually had conversations with many of the G7 government leaders who have declining populations. The growth of productivity through AI, robotics, is going to be your only way of growing out of your economy. Because I wrote about it, as you have declining population, obviously fewer mouths to feed, less economic activity, rising deficits, and what I'm suggesting is there's trillions of dollars of private capital. The need for the rise of the capital markets to finance decarbonization, digitization, with a lot of pragmatism. And the most scary part of it is we are not going to move forward fast enough. I do believe AI is going to reshape the world very rapidly. I believe it's going to be the new Cold War. Where is AI going to be positioned? What country, who are we going to be allowing this? It's going to be a major change. But the positives of all this is going to be if we deploy more private capital working alongside governments, we're going to be able to grow out of our problems. And that is why I'm optimistic still. I have a lot of hope that if we can change our focus to greater pragmatism, to have more speedy permitting process, we would then have much more of a foundation of growth and a growth engine. If you overlay the need for power, which is going to be more important than ever. And if you believe in AI and the amount of power you need for AI, it's going to be in states that have more rapid permitting to build out these big mega data centers that have some form of renewable energy, some form of dispatchable energy. In my view, it's going to mean more and more data centers are going to be populated in Texas and Pennsylvania. And so all of these things are going to be reshaping how we think about the future. But the key is we need to find ways of growing, and growth is going to be if we have this pragmatism of utilization of more private capital, but we're going to have to grow our economy through greater productivity. Technology is the engine of increased productivity. And we've had a technological boom for 20 years, and yet we're sitting with a sub 4% unemployment rate. And so technology does change jobs, but over time it creates new jobs. And the problem is that transition, and also there's geographic differences too. So how do you blend that and balance that out? And so I look at all the benefits that technology could be, and there's no question in my mind. The bad players are going to be able to use AI to increase the volume of bad information, misinformation. So what that means is the need of technology to decipher what is good information and bad information is just so much more need of power. I'm sure all of you are using some form of chat GPT, and I'm sure all you use Bing and Google searches. When you do an AI search, the use of power is multiples of what it costs to do a Google search. And if we're going to start using AI more and more, because the need for power to filter out all that bad information to come up with 100% accuracy in the outcome, the power need of that is exponential. And if you want to have a search that's 90% accurate, that I don't think anyone wants, it requires a lot less power. But if you need a search that is 100% reliable and you're getting not bad information, you're getting the right information, it just requires so much more power. And I don't think most people understand how much more power a ChatGPT search costs versus a simple Google search. And so as we use more and more AI, it's going to create huge opportunities for infrastructure build out of data centers and power sources and all that. Great jobs. But let me also say one thing. This is so powerful for the United States. We do have cheap energy. We do have a lot of land for wind and solar. Places like Europe that does not have domestic power. It's a real problem, a real serious problem. The role of the Middle East only enhances. The power that they could provide is going to be enormous. So, and this creates fear because you're going to see the whole landscape changing and the opportunity. And then, I haven't mentioned China. China is right now in the process, I'm told, of building out over 200 gigawatts of power. They are moving very relentlessly on AI, that they're, in many cases, they're a couple of years away. Some people think they're only months away. So they're building this out. They don't have the issue of permitting there. This is going to be changing the world in so many ways. And this is not a war in Gaza. This is not what happened in Israel. This is not Ukraine and what's going on there. This is going to be a whole new realm, and it's going to change quite a bit in the world to come. The United States, we have the land, we have the technology, we have the brains. We now need government and more pragmatism to let it flourish, and we're going to really grow out of it.